Project Blue is a true NES experience that honestly comes with a bit of everything. You have some very difficult platforming, you have some bosses, you get a great soundtrack, and you even get a share of exploration. The story is set in Neo Hong Kong, or more specifically in Omni Corp. This corporation is so large that it produces pretty much everything from cereal to weapons, but they also dabble in human experimentation, which leads us to the protagonist of this story, Blue. You escape from your confinement and use your newfound powers to bring down Omni Corp. Also, this information is all available in the game's manual, where you can read up on the story, the enemies, the villains, and so on. Additionally, in the game's menu, you can swap the layout of the background. Regardless, I doubt your interest lays within the story of a title built for the NES. The game begins fast, and you're met with some eye-grabbing colors and a fantastic tune. As you make your way through the levels, you can expect to come across some mechanical bad guys who are always disrupting your platforming and flow, with many of them being actually immune to your attacks. These enemies might not be too varied, but they're used perfectly when coming across a new screen. You always have to map out the best route to progress, so in this case, I actually think less is better, which is not something I usually say. These aren't randomly placed enemies that you'll find in other platformers. They're instead strategically put on each screen as an actual obstacle, so you get the full usage from them. Now, there's only 4 levels in this title, however, each one is broken down into bits where you'll find new platforming gimmicks and hazards, as well as a new soundtrack to fit the futuristic-like aesthetic. Some levels might have as many as 4 different tunes, and yes, they're all worth a listen. I get a bit nervous when reviewing games from 8-Bit Legit since these are true NES titles. You can actually find Project Blue as a cartridge. Believe it or not, I can really only play 1 or maybe 2 hours at a time, and I need to progress to make a review. So to my surprise, although challenging, Project Blue is fair. That is, if you want it to be, since you do have the option to play on brutal. I chose normal. You begin with a set of lives, and instead of starting you at the beginning of a given level after a game over, you can actually reach checkpoints within a stage, making it feel beatable. However, just because you get some cushion through this, it's still vital to stay up on your lives or you'll be dead before you know it. Throughout the primarily linear experience, there's plenty of branching paths to choose from where you'll be tempted to retrieve hearts, weapon upgrades, health upgrades, and more, but usually at the cost of a more difficult platforming obstacle. I usually stayed away from these because they reset anyway if you get a game over, and I got plenty of those. This is not a Metroidvania. The focus is on platforming and you have the option to take more challenging routes. Plus, you never need to worry about getting lost. Forward is always the answer. Each level has its own color scheme and theming that the platforming is based around. Whether you're spending your time swimming in the underground or gliding into zone, you'll always be met with fresh ideas. Now, Project Blue is as simple as it gets, as I played on the Switch with an NES controller. You can jump and shoot, but when done right, that's all you need. This game does have that sliding feature that many titles had in the 80s and 90s, but it's fairly balanced. The combat consists of shooting moving enemies which don't have much health. However, you're expected to take a more calculated approach as you're placed in tight areas where precision is most important. The core of the gameplay is revolved around mapping out the correct approach to each room and then perfecting it. This may take several attempts, as you might master 3 rooms in a row, but then the 4th one could leave you stumped, which was me here. I probably say this too much, but timing is key, whether it be trying to jump between enemies or shooting enemies while also avoiding their projectiles. Before you know it, you'll be doing both of these things while also on a moving platform. These rooms are tight, so there isn't much room for air, not to mention that you begin each life with only 2 hearts, so you'll always want to go for those. I really don't have much else to say here. I think the takeaway I got is that mapping these areas and crafting your preferred approach is just a lot of fun, rather than the typical continuing screen of most 2D platforms. But like others of the genre, you can of course expect some boss fights. Each level has 2 bosses, and you can even read about them a bit in the manual, which is always a plus in my opinion. Their designs are not anything spectacular, as they're all basically living machines with unique functions. However, they are most certainly challenging at first. I found myself panicking in pretty much every battle I was in simply because I didn't know what to do, and feared restarting from that checkpoint. The first boss of a given level is an easier version of the final one, which will bring new attacks for you to memorize. They all really only have one primary weapon, so the battle's focus is less on on their difficulty, but more so on how well you can manage the space around you and how precise your aim is. During level 2's boss, I spent a lot of valuable time mindlessly jumping around because I did not understand the correct spacing. So once you take your time, you'll find the bosses in Project Blue to be enjoyable. I wouldn't call them the standout aspect of this title, but they're still a fun time nonetheless. Project Blue excels at what it's trying to accomplish, and that's being a true retro platformer with some added modern features such as fairness and exploration. So if you're looking for a game with some great strategic platforming, some amazing tunes, and a true retro feel, then Project Blue might be something you're looking for. For some perspective, the movement feels like Mario Bros. 3 and the combat is similar to Mega Man, but there's definitely less action than in Mega Man. You'll be able to find Project Blue now on the Switch and Xbox for around $10 if it's not discounted. I've honestly never played a title quite like this one, so I'd love to see other games take this slower, more methodical approach to platforming. Regardless, if you enjoy retro games, then check out the 8-Bit Legit catalog because there's plenty to find there. So, until next time.